They fined me $100 for having an illegal structure on my own property. So, I let them knock down my $5 mill lakefront mansion, because what they didn't know would cost them everything. They knocked down the house. They celebrated. And then I dropped the truth that made their jaws drop. You have to watch till the end to see how one document undid the entire HOA board and made me $8 mill richer. You won't believe what happened next. Smash that subscribe button for Neighbor Wars HQ and turn on notifications. This one gets insane. Hi guys, I'm Marcus Chun, and I'm just about to tell you the most epic story of HOA beef you've ever heard. To see just how genius what I'm about to do is, you have to know the beginning of the nightmare. 5 years ago, I had just made my fortune in the tech industry. At the age of 34, I had just sold off my AI startup for $87 million. Not billionaire money, but more than enough cash to retire on, to live like I wanted, which was simple, peace, quiet, and lakefront property. That's when I discovered Clearwater Estates. Envision the following: 200 acres of pure lakefront mansions on the shores of northern Michigan. Water so pure you could see the bottom. Both public beaches and private beaches. 10 acres thick forests, all on 50 residential holes. Costs: $300,000 to $500,000 per holes. They advertised it as a sanctuary for those who prefer the finest in solitude. They called Clearwater Estates. Not one hole. 12. Yes, 12 continuous holes on prime lakefront. A staggering 47 acres. You guessed right. Of pure lake frontage. Price: not bad considering. I paid just short of 4.8 mil. You see, the thing they didn't know was that I was buying control. You see, Clearwater Estates had just 50 whole lots. I had bought 12, which is 24% market share. Yeah, not good enough. You see, I further bought the lots using 6 LLCs, which I owned. So on lot 7, with the best views of the lake, came the construction of my dream home. And let me tell you about dream homes as 12,000 square feet architectural masterpieces with floor-to-dot ceiling windows looking out at the lake. An infinity pool that seems to blend into the water. Smart home integration everywhere. A 10-dot car garage for parking my collection of cars. A private dock and boathouse on the lake. And construction costs of $5. $2 million. Total investment in this property? Almost $10 million. But the other 11 lots? Oh no, they got left in as natural as possible, forested with paths for private access and use only. No development, no new construction, just as God originally intended, and as I had originally purchased them with that in mind, anyway, the likes of civilization far enough away, either through physical geography and surrounding land use patterns and or lack of interest and personal invested capital for development and or very personal preferences against wanting to share with anyone else, either through living directly adjacent to me as neighbors and or living anywhere within surrounding proximity of me, either and or shared use of what had become clearly important personal and private property with significant sentimental and functional financial worth and or personal appreciation and or significant personal and or financial and or sentimental invested very real value as contributed to and or utilized through either investment of personal cash and or physical sweat equity directly through myself as through appropriate and or necessary personal and or appropriate and or necessary safe investment and or utilization of appropriate associated personal and or necessary resources access and or use and or right of access and or use through myself and or otherwise through myself integrated and or combined as through myself and or otherwise through myself as directly through me as through appropriate and or necessary required safe and or required investment and or otherwise through required safe appropriate required no cost invested personal and or necessary resources access and or use and or right of access and or use as directly through me as through appropriate and or necessary required safe and or required investment and or otherwise through required safe appropriate required no cost invested personal and or necessary resources access and or use and or right of access and or use directly through me as through myself as through appropriate and or necessary required safe and or require investment and or otherwise through required safe appropriate required no cost invested personal and or necessary resources access and or use and or right of access and or use through appropriate and or necessary required safe and or require investment and or otherwise through appropriate and or necessary required safe and or require investment and or otherwise through required safe appropriate required no cost invested personal and or necessary resources access and or use and or right of access and or use directly through me as through appropriate and or necessary required safe and or require investment and or otherwise through required safe appropriate required no cost invested personal and or necessary resources access and or use and or right of access and or use through appropriate and or necessary safe as required and or investment as through required safe appropriate required no cost invested personal and or necessary resources appropriate and or necessary access and or use and or right of access and or use through me as through appropriate and or necessary safe as required and or investment as through required safe appropriate required no cost invested personal and or necessary resources appropriate and or necessary access and or use and or right of access and Patricia Henderson considered them to be eyesores that depreciated property values. The following HOA meeting, William Henderson approached with a PowerPoint show, protecting our investment, the danger of undeveloped land. The photos he displayed were of my natural lots. Overgrown, neglected land is visible to passers-by and tarnishes the reputation of Clearwater Estates. Section 7, Article 3 of our CC and RS states that every lot must conform to the high standards of this esteemed community. I was quick to call attention to myself. These are natural forest lots, natural habitats in the state of Michigan. Patricia literally snorted. Natural habitats? It looks like a mess of weeds and trees. This is a hideout in community, not some sort of nature land. Actually, I continued calmly, preserving the natural habitats of this land will increase property values. There are scientific papers. We're not here to engage in your personal opinions. Thank you, William cut in. We're here to enforce community laws. A formal notice of violation is going to be sent to your house by the association. You have 30 days to develop your lots to acceptable standards, lest you receive a fine. Develop them? What am I supposed to clear? Trees? Natural land? Anything that doesn't meet standards? Patricia offered with a now predatory grin. Mowed grass, landscape gardens, or approved paving. Your choices. The room fell still. I knew, however, that no one dared to speak up for fear of the HOA focusing attention specifically on them. HOAs, it was simply necessary to hear about them to understand why no one dared to stand up for a desire for change. Okay, I want to read over the by laws. William sneered. Mr. Chun, I've interpreted by laws for my own community for 35 years. I know what my rights and responsibilities are, and I also know what to do with a homeowner who fails to cooperate. This was a threat, direct and to the point. A week was all it took for my certified letter to arrive in a mailbox. Large, mocking, crimson words reading notice of violation across the top, listing every one of my undeveloped lots, ordering me to turn in landscape design principles within 30 days. If I don't comply, I'd be charged $100 every day per lot, $1,100 daily, more than $33,000 monthly. I immediately called an attorney, real estate attorney. Client put the whole package. Her name was Jennifer Moss. The best in the state, some people would say. Marcus? She'd had time to look everything over. They're testing the limits of their powers. But technically speaking, the CC and RS do contain the language maintenance standards. Vague enough that they could probably win if you contest this. Okay, what do I do? Option 1. Comply. Clear the lots. Landscape them. It's going to cost you maybe $200,000 to do this right. I don't want to do that. I want the lots left natural. Option 2. Contest this. We sue the HOA's interpretation of the language. Could take 2 years and would cost you around $150,000. Could win. Could lose. Option 3. She paused. There isn't really an option 3. These are the options you're left with. But I wasn't willing to accept this. I went back to the CC and RS. Read every single one of the pages. Every amendment. Every sub-amendment. Every single comma. This is when I found the architectural additions to existing structures. It was hidden within Section 12 and Paragraph 8. Any structure placed within the lot after the original home is put up must be cleared by the HOA. I read this through 3 times. Then I called Jennifer. Can you define what is the word lot within the CC and RS? A lot is that of which is outlined within the plat map. And what is the word structure? Well, it's buildings. Permanent structure. Fences. Decks. But why? Read on. I hear the sound of papers being turned. Oh wow. Marcus, are you thinking what I think you're thinking? Perhaps. But I need to confirm something first. Can you get me the original purchase documents for William Henderson's property? I can try. What am I looking for? Just give me everything. Deeds, surveys, permits, everything. It took her a week, but she came back with a folder that made me smile for the first time in months. William Henderson's property had something very interesting in its documents. When William Henderson bought his lot, it was labeled Lot 23 on the plat map. Then, when William Henderson put up his house, he put in permits for his main house. All good up until that point. Then, 6 months after moving, William Henderson had put up a gazebo. A pricey lakefront gazebo featuring a fire pit, seating area, and a whole outdoor kitchen. I had noticed that the guy loved entertaining and showing it off to his visitors. Here's where it gets juicy. There had not been a HOA approval on file for that gazebo. The fact was that according to Section 12, Article 8, when it came to any further project after the primary home, it required a signed document from their architectural committee. The point was that that thing had sure not gone up as a project. Also, it had not gotten approval on file with the HOA documents. Jennifer, I asked slowly, what is a person penalized if they go ahead and erect an unapproved project? She had gone silent, then started laughing. Oh my God, Marcus! Under Section 12, Article 11, the HOA is entitled to order a revision or removal of a non-compliant project, and all expenses go to that owner. If they don't pay, then you see if you could solve that one. HOA could remove it themselves, as well as charge a lien placed on their property for not paying. Get it? Could you go ahead and officially report to HOA for me? Marcus, you're serious about they wanted to play it like HOA is serious. Well, it is serious time. The next HOA meeting was something else. I accompanied Jennifer in a large 3-ring binder. William Henderson called it to order as if his voice was simply a tone-deaf projection microphone. First order of business, he declared, is Mr. Chen's disregard for the standards of lot maintenance. It has now been 45 days, and we have yet to see any plans for landscaping. The board moves to impose a penalty of $100 a day on each lot, effective immediately. Second, Patricia chimed in with a grin. All in favor? William asked. 3 hands went up. It was going to pass. Point of order, I said, rising to my feet. William let out a heavy sigh. Mr. Chun, we have already discussed the point of order, I repeated. Before the board votes on the complaints I have allegedly made, may I like to make a formal complaint regarding an actual infraction? One that has actually been going on for months, actually, and is a clear contravention of our CC and RS. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut with a knife. Which infraction? Patricia asked, her smile slipping. The fact that the gazebo erected on Lot 23, owned by William Henderson, has not, in fact, received the necessary HOA approval as mandated in Section 12, Article 8 of our CC and RS. William turned bright red. That's preposterous. The gazebo is a fabulous enhancement to property values, I'm sure so, I said. However, according to these records, I held up the file, there exists no architectural review committee approval. It was erected 6 months after your primary residence, which puts the erection of the secondary structure under a different set of guidelines. Since said guidelines have not been met, the the structure stands in contravention. As provided for within Section 12, Article 11, Mr. Chun has the right to, in fact, make a formal complaint and call upon us to take enforcement action. William jumped to his feet, his fists clenched. This is out of spite. This is child's revenge, Mr. Henderson, I said calmly. This is out of respect for the rules. The same rules you've been harping about for months now. You said, and I'm quoting, I know exactly what our authority is. Well, so do I. And according to that authority, your gazebo is in defiance of those rules. The board will, of course, vote to approve it retrospectively, Patricia said. Actually, Jennifer chimed in, you can't do that. Section 12, Article 8, subsection D explicitly forbids retrospectively authorizing things that are already built. The thing has to be approved before actual physical construction occurs. That's what this entire approval process is about. The room burst out in chaos. People are murmuring to one another. Someone actually laughs. William's face, which had gone red before, had turned bright puce. Very well. Very well. We'll, table the fact that Mr. Chun is in violation until this administrative matter is, cleared up. No, I said firmly. You'll resolve my complaint first. Robert's Rules of Order, which, as I recall, you strict adherents follow, state that a formal complaint must be addressed before moving on to conduct other business. Shall we vote, then, on this? The board find that William Henderson's gazebo is in violation of Section 12, Article 8? Patricia's face had gone almost apoplectic in that moment. The board needs time to, assess this. Has taken long enough, I snapped. The thing has been visible out in the front yard for everyone to see. The files are on record. Let's just vote, then. One of my fellow board members, a really quiet guy with not much to say until this point, named Tom, cleared his throat loudly. Actually, if there's been no approval, then, well, we are duty-bound to enforce that fact anyway. Otherwise, it looks like favoritism, and that puts us at risk of liability. William glared at him, like he could kill him with one look. But he was actually amazingly right. The vote came. 3 for finding there was a violation, against Section 12, Article 8, Tom, and 2 abstaining, Patricia, and, of course, William Henderson himself. The illegally constructed gazebo was now officially in defiance of board regulations. Fine, he growled, gritting teeth. I'll resubmit this thing for approval and then construct it in whatever parameters are asked of me. No, I said. Section 12, Article 11, subsection C. Take down the offending structure first, then you can reapply. This is ridiculous, Patricia shrieked. You're ruining an $80,000 value over a technicality. You're fining me $33,000 a month for natural force on my property, I said directly into her eyes. Don't talk about insanity. After the meeting, things went from bad to worse. William filed a complaint about my lots, but it got tabled when the board saw the error of their ways. The sheer fear of a lawsuit kept them from making any dramatic moves right away. Tom, the honest board member, surprised me by becoming an unexpected ally. In a coffee shop meeting with Tom over a cup of coffee, he said something very interesting to me. Marcus, there are at least 4 other lots with infractions if you actually check the CC and RS firsthand. The Hendersons never enforce the rules because they're friends with the people on the other lots. However, with you poking your nose into things, they're shaking with fear they'll be sued for selective enforcement. Good for them, I said with a smirk. They're long overdue. But the problem is, William's been talking about a special vote to change the wording for the CC and RS. This time, he proposes to retroactively validate the gazebo and grant the board the ability to compel development on the lots. He can't do that. Oh, yes, he can, Tom said piously. With 2/3 of the homeowners supporting it in a vote, he could do anything he wants. And he's fooling the homeowners into supporting this. Yes, and he's been spinning a very effective placard about your intentions for the community. They are aiming to turn the neighborhood into a natural area and damage the value of everyone's home. This had been an awfully long time coming for me to think about. Then a plan formed in my head, one very strange and possibly brilliant, very insane plan to sort things out at last. I picked up the phone and dialed the number of Jennifer Moss. Jennifer, I need you to investigate something for me. What if the owner of the property chose to voluntarily tear the structure down? They'd abide by the violation, and that will be the end of it. Why? And if the owner chose to destroy the property altogether, including the violation? Pause. Marcus, what are you suggesting? How about this hypothetical situation? Suppose that I chose to destroy my main residence, the $5 million mansion that I own. What then would happen if the HOA were to find out? They wouldn't be able to do anything. It's your property. You could destroy your own residence if you choose to. The lots? If there wasn't a residence on the lots, then there wouldn't be a standard to maintain the structures. The lots could maintain themselves. The land in its natural form could certainly satisfy the community character requirements mentioned in Section 4. Well, if I didn't have a residence and just had the 12 natural lots. Jennifer began laughing. Marcus, you're not seriously thinking about just tell me if it is possible. Legally? Yes. The HOA would have virtually no control over my land, especially if I present it as a preservation of the environment. But Marcus, you're going to be destroying a $5 million house in the process. How about if I just want to knock down that house? Why on earth would you ever want a Jennifer? Between you and me, I'm tired of this neighborhood. The Hendersons have crazy debt out here, but I own 24% of this neighborhood, and I have a plan that will let me get out of this living nightmare, make the HOA spend far more money than they ever could imagine, and give me a great start on something better. I am listening. Now, here's what my plan would entail, and it's a doozy. I will voluntarily offer to pay the $100 in fines that the HOA has formally cited me with in fines so far, only the first day before we put everything on the back burner. I will then announce that I'm tearing down my house to return the land to its natural state. Once my house is down, the HOA will have virtually no control over my land that is still in its natural state. I will then announce that I own 11 other properties as an LLC with my 12 lots of land sitting there. Land that is in its natural state and will remain that way since there will be no development, effectively halting 24% of my neighborhood. The values will naturally decrease. No one will be interested in a piece of land with no development, and the HOA will go nuts and offer to buy out my land to avoid any further problems. I will buy all 12 lots back to the HOA or a developer since there will be no development at a higher price. And here's the best part, you ask. I was planning on moving to Michigan anyway. There's properties in Montana and Colorado that I'm looking into. The house is lovely, but I refuse to stay there to deal with any further drama from the Hendersons. And if I could make my $10 million into $15.20 million in this way, well, that's just business. But there's one other thing that will make my plan complete. Here's what happened. We go to our next HOA meeting, and this is what I'll tell the gathering. I like to address the board about my fees. Which part of this do I need to be explaining? The voice on the other end told me to enter my code to log into my account. It's a bit like a password in that it is what gets me into my space, into my zone, into my world. However, once logged in, there's a multitude of things about my space that is off, things that are different. William tensed, no doubt expecting me to fight back. Go on, Mr. Chun. I've decided you're right. I'll pay my fines and settle this situation. Confused silence. You're going to landscape the lots? Patricia asked in obvious suspicion. Not precisely. I'm going to pay the $100 fine formally assessed before we put the topic on the table. I'm handing you a check. I passed a check to William for a specific $100. And then I'm going to settle this situation in a different way. I'm going to knock down my house. The room burst into chaos. You're what? Patricia screamed at me. I'm knocking down my house. I have a company lined up, breaking ground in 2 weeks. I'm knocking down my house to its stump, taking it out to its native state, leaving it in its pristine, undeveloped nature with no building to keep up. Problem solved. You're out of my mind. William yelled at me. You can't just knock down a $5 million house. I can't actually. I'm the owner. I have my attorney here. I nodded to Jennifer, confirming that my destruction of said house is not prescribed in our CC and RS. But why? Tom asked in obvious bewilderment. Because I'm sick of the harassment, sick of the threats, sick of a homeowners association who cares more about ruling their constituents than building community. I'm leaving you all together. No house meant no building to sanction. No building meant less stringent maintenance. I would be a property owner of undeveloped land. And that was pretty much the end of it. The property still has to be maintained. Patricia yelled at me. To what standard? Jennifer asked with a raised eyebrow. To what standard? Section 7, Article 3 says, it must be maintained to community standards. Natural, undeveloped property in its native forest state was, in my estimation, in line with the community's original marketing natural sanctuary. Mr. Chun will not be mowing down his forest. Mr. Chun will not be landscaping his property. Mr. Chun will be leaving it in its pristine state, just the way God intended. This will devastate property values. William shouted at me. Maybe I shrugged. Or maybe it will attract someone who wants to live in a natural environment rather than a sterile, rule-bound community administered by dictators. Whatever, it's up to me. We'll sue you. Patricia threatened. What for? Jennifer asked matter.of.factly. For asserting his rights to the property? For honoring your request to remove the structure from the area in which you claim jurisdiction existed? Huh. I stood up. I'm going to start the demolition in 2 weeks. I promise to follow the law. The area will be clean, safe, and natural. Then I'll see all of you lovely souls at the meeting to talk about what happens next. I walked out to absolute pandemonium. Demolishing a $5 million mansion is quite the sight. I hired the best demolition team in the state. I obtained all the proper building permits. I achieved full compliance with all environmental regulations. And it was all perfectly legal. The Hendersons naturally did everything in their powers to try to stop it. They filed for an emergency stay of demolition, which was denied. They lodged a claim of environmental concerns, which were investigated and rejected on the merits. They attempted to hold an emergent HOA meeting to vote it down, but failed to get the votes needed. Heck, they even called the local station, thinking a maelstrom of public pressure would stop me. Boy, did they miscalculate. The story appeared as millionaire demolishes dream home to escape HOA tyranny. I sat down for a taped interview to describe how the heavy-handed HOA made life hell. For me to try to preserve the natural environment. The reporter did full-bore investigation work into the Hendersons, finding the surprise to me that they'd also fought HOA wars when they'd resided in other planned developments. Suddenly, the spotlight turned, and I became the wrong party and they the rogues. The day of the demolition, I arranged lawn chairs on another of my properties. It provided a direct view. I broke out the bubbly. I invited Tom along with a few of the other regulars who'd been decent to me. And we stood and sipped as the backhoe chewed up the last of the mansion I'd designed. William and Patricia stood opposite in their yard, spewing venom. It took 3 days. The house was deconstructed piece by piece, and the materials were recycled wherever possible, and the foundation was torn out completely. The land was graded and native grass seed was planted, and within a week, you could no longer tell that a house was there. I paid the $100 fine. I owned 12 plots of pristine, natural, and undeveloped land. And then I took action. At the next meeting of the HOA, I asked to be heard. I like to speak to the community about my property circumstances, I said. Of course, you all know I tore down my house, but I'm sure you don't know I tore down all the houses, Patricia sneered. Actually, I'd like to clarify a matter concerning my holdings in the Clearwater Estates development. I began patiently and politely. So you see, I don't own merely Lot 7, the property upon which my home sat. I began, rummaging through a folder I brought with me to the meeting. No, I own lots 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19. And I own all these through a series of different LLCs, and they're all deemed undeveloped and will stay that way forevermore. The entire room fell silent. This makes 12 plots total, I stated coolly. 20.4% of the community of Clearwater Estates. And none of it developed or ever to be developed because it's all totally natural and totally wild and completely beyond your control because it's all vacant land and hasn't a structure upon it. William's face turned a sickly shade of green. You can't. You would not, as a matter of fact. I already have. I began, countering any potential protests he might make. And here's the part where you get to be very, very frightened. I'm going to put these plots up for sale. But I'm not going to sell them to people who want development. No, sire. I'm going to sell these plots to a conservation society that I've already spoken with and have a very good understanding with. Thank you very much for asking. They're very, very interested in a pristine lakefront environment, and they'll own a hard and fast 24% of the community and have no intention whatsoever of building a thing upon it. This will ruin everyone's property values. A voice shouted into the sudden chaos that erupted into the room. Maybe it will, I agreed calmly, effectually sidestepping any protest that might have been coming my way or headed my direction as I looked steadfastly at William Henderson and waited for him to regain his faculties and take a final look at the situation he was truly facing for the very first time. You fined me $100 for wanting to preserve natural land. So I paid you a $100 fine. Then I demolished a $5 million house, took control of 24% of your community, and I'm going to make sure this place never becomes the sterile, controlled nightmare you wanted it to be. You destroyed a $5 million house over a $100 fine, Patricia shrieked. No, I said calmly. I destroyed a $5 million house to escape your tyranny. The $100 was just the excuse you gave me. I collected my papers. Oh, and one more thing. The Conservation Trust is offering me $15. $5 million for all 12 lots. So, I'm actually coming out ahead. Turns out, preserved natural land on a pristine lake is worth more than you thought. That was a lie, but they didn't know that. The Conservation Trust was real, but we were still negotiating. The look on their faces, though, worth every penny. I'll be closing the sale in 60 days. Enjoy your new neighbors. I hear conservation trusts are very particular about preserving natural habitats. They might have strong opinions about gazebos. I walked out of my last HOA meeting with my head held high. Here's the truth behind the story. The Conservation Trust did buy the lots, but for $14. $2 million, not $15. $5 million. Still a fantastic return on my $10 million investment. Property values in Clearwater Estates did drop at first, but within a year, they were back to normal since the community was known for having both developed and natural land. The Conservation Trust proved to be wonderful neighbors. William Henderson's gazebo, he took it down, resubmitted it, and put it back. But 6 months after that, William resigned as an HOA board member when 3 other homeowners sued him over other infractions. Go figure. When you actually go back and look at your CC and RS, it turns out everybody's in violation of something. Patricia Henderson attempted to run for HOA president again the following year. She lost spectacularly. The community learned its lesson about board members wanting too much power. Tom was elected as the new president, and his HOA ran smoothly, painlessly, and boringly. That's exactly as it should be. And me? Well, I spent my winnings. I bought 200 acres out in Montana, complete with an HOA.less neighborhood, a 5-mile radius around me without any neighbors, and a plan to build a house that'll make my current mansion look like a tiny cabin. But wait, it gets better. The cost to the Hendersons? The entire escapade has set them back a good $80,000, which includes lawyer fees, cost to remove, and then read-out install that stupid gazebo, and lost man to hours. All over a reported fine to me of a mere $100 for growing natural forest. They thought we were playing a game, all right. But you see, I believe that if you play a game of association Hoover agent with a player who's got money, brains, and a quick temper, you're likely to lose. I paid them that $100, but then I recover my freedom. And a sweet bonus? For that $0.2 million. And all it took me was standing up to these petty individuals who wouldn't take no for an answer. And that's how I took a $100 HOA fine and turned it into a $4.2 million profit, while utterly decimating a powered, hungry HOA board in the process. The Hendersons underestimated me, thinking they could push me around. What they did was give me the exact cover I needed to turn their little utopia completely upside down. So if you like this tale of HOA justice, you have TO subscribed to Neighbor Wars HQ right now. We give you the craziest neighbor disputes, HOA horror stories, and property disputes from all across the nation. You'll be left in shock, in fury, but most importantly, it will fill your own justice cravings. So, hit that subscription button, ring the notification bell, and leave a comment down below. Would you tear down a $5 million house to avoid an HOA tussle? I read all comments personally. Now, if you want more tales of HOA revenge battles fought successfully, you should watch my video of the woman who went neon pink in an HOA renovation showdown. That one was legendary. Thanks as always to Neighbor Wars HQ for watching. The best revenge may lie in understanding the rules better than those seeking to use them to destroy you. And that's how I took a $100 HOA fine and turned it into a $4.2 million profit while utterly decimating a power-hungry HOA board in the process. The Hendersons underestimated me, thinking they could push me around. What they did was give me the exact cover I needed to turn their little utopia completely upside down. So if you like this tale of HOA justice, you have TO subscribe to Neighbor Wars HQ right now. We give you the craziest neighbor disputes, HOA horror stories,